Thank you to my channel members and Ko-fi supporters that make these videos possible. You can also support me by purchasing a deck review slot to get your brood reviewed on my weekly Sunday streams. More info in the video description. Hello everyone. No. I'm kidding. Mostly. Rebel put me and a few other content creators, Trinket Mage, Arcosa, Geek and Seek, and Malthound, up to the task of making a video about the format's #1 commander, Atraxa. Since we've all known to be more on the innovative hipster side of Magic, especially me, it makes for a fun challenge to try to make this format all-star into something unique. Trust me when I say it took my all to find something for Atraxa that didn't feel extremely derivative and boring. You just need to look at one of my previous thumbnails I drew to see how I feel about Atraxa. You see, Atraxa is an archetype hog. There really is no better word for it. She has so many colors available to her, and her ability is generically good with a wide swath of mechanics that it becomes the de facto choice for any archetype that uses counters. Sagas, Planeswalkers, Infect, +1/+1 counters, all of these archetypes have cool commanders for them, but it's easier to just shove them into Atraxa and it will probably result in a stronger deck in the end. Simply put, Atraxa is too generic of an engine and has too wide of a color identity to boot, making her outshine more interestingly designed cards. This isn't to say that every 4 or even 5 color commander card can't be interesting, however. I think the best example of a good design in this vein is Niv Mizzet Supreme. He's all 5 colors, which gives him access to every card in the game, but he only grants value to cards that are exactly 2 colors. I feel this is the key to cool high color design, having a theme that puts some restriction on the cards you want to run, so you don't have a soup of good stuff, but not too narrow that you end up becoming an archetype hog like Atraxa. This Niv is one of those cards that falls right in the middle sweet spot for me. I've been informed that this video is not about Niv Mizzet, however, and is instead about Atraxa, so let's get into the deck I built around her. Obviously, for starters, Planeswalkers, Infect, +1/+1 counters, and other well-established builds for Atraxa are off limits. That ground rule established, one of the first major hurdles I had when finding things I wanted to proliferate was things that had a huge impact right away. Because let's face it, Atraxa is a removal muncher. In a way, she sort of feels like a sorcery that gives you a proliferation trigger on your end step, because good luck untapping with her. My first thought was all the cards that trigger whenever one or more +1/+1 counters are placed on them, which would allow Atraxa to get value the turn she's played, making her worth jamming even through removal. And while this niche may be enough to count as its own thing, it felt a little too much like any old +1/+1 counter Atraxa deck. I thought about maybe Sagas, though that too felt a little too easy. Besides, Sagas are most interesting when you remove counters from them to keep them around and re-trigger them rather than proliferating them. So then, what cards were funny when proliferated and also gave value right away to make Atraxa worth it? Well, there are none with my restriction, but there are shield counters, which get progressively funny the more you have, and also actively protect Atraxa from most forms of removal. This was the way I was going to go with my deck. Shield counters to keep Atraxa, the most removal-prone commander in Magic, alive. For starters, I included cards like Mother of Runes, Guardian Augmenteer, and Sarenth to make it safe to play Atraxa as a means of setting her up. These cards also protect a shield-countered up Atraxa from forms of removal that don't destroy, like Swords to Plowshares and Bounce Spells. In the protection suite as well, the deck runs a slew of efficient counter magic to help keep cards like Farewell or Cyclonic Rift at bay. Let's get into the meat then. The shield counter cards. The 2 best enablers are Agent's Toolkit and Boon of Safety, both of which give Atraxa a shield counter the turn she comes down, making for 2 by your end step. From there, the answers to Atraxa really start to narrow. The deck also runs Contractual Safeguard, which can help spread the counters to other creatures to be proliferated, and then moved back onto Atraxa with the help of Nesting Grounds or Slippery Bog Bonder. Family's Favor makes for some nice card advantage after a counter is put on Atraxa, but can also be used to start the pile. The cards Proud Pack Rhino, Perry, Singer of Swift Rivers all put a counter on entering, which gets more clunky but is still appreciated. Lastly is Falco Spara, who can prove to be one of the strongest card advantage spells in the deck, but can also help Atraxa get a shield counter from one of the previously mentioned counter movers. Let's also talk about a couple of notable exclusions for the deck during this time. Firstly is Cross Defense Contractor. While he is a funny piece, he ultimately doesn't keep Atraxa safe himself. He places shield counters, but he doesn't do it in the way that other cards in the deck care about. For that reason, I left him out of the deck. Though I did consider for a second a kind of group hug Atraxa plan, I quickly left the idea on the sidelines. Similarly, Shield Broker, Sanctuary Warden, Titan of Industry, and Undercover Operative are all either too expensive to fit in the curve, or are using shield counters, but not in a way that actually protects Atraxa or contributes to the play patterns of the deck. So with only 8 shield counter generators in the deck, how does Atraxa get awarded with any amount of consistency? Well, it wouldn't be one of my decks without a convoluted toolbox package, and for this one, I decided to go with Wizards. The crux of the package are cards like Step Through, Voldalkin Aether Mage, and Spellseeker, all of which can start some serious value chains. Step Through and Aether Mage lets you get any wizard in the deck. If you need value fast, you can get Spellseeker right away, but if you have a bit of breathing room, Archaeomancer allows for the most broken value loops with Step Through. This is because Archaeomancer can return Step Through back to your hand and cycle it for Spellseeker. Spellseeker gets Ephemerate, and from there you can get Boon of Safety, Counter Magic, a big X draw spell in the form of Pull from Tomorrow, a board clear in Winds of Abandon, or a Fog. When Ephemerate rebounds, if you have Archaeomancer, you can target her with the Flicker to get the Ephemerate back to start the value loop over. Or if you didn't, you can just get a third card out of your Spellseeker. If I wanted to, extra turn spells here with Ephemerate and Archaeomancer is a combo, but I opted to keep only a Fog that can be looped in the form of Lull to keep the package more tight. Besides, this is a supporting piece to the main deck, not the focus. While the Archaeomancer Spellseeker Flicker party is the star of the toolbox, they aren't the only reason I opted for this package, as Trinket Mage is what gives the deck finishing power. Trinket Mage can indeed get Everflowing Chalice and Astral Cornucopia, staples for Proliferate decks, but he can also get Luxior, Giada's Gift, which can turn shield counters into a lethal +X buff. Rounding out the deck are individual cards I feel deserve a shout out and a few honorable mentions. Firstly is Deep Glow Skate, Vorel of the Hulklade, and Zamone Paradox Sculptor, which all can start doubling shield counters on Atraxa, which can get her to comical levels. Zamone here is tutorable off the Wizard Cycling package, and the +1/+1 counter she gives is a good backup plan to Luxior. Next is the funniest card of the deck by far, and one of only 5 black cards this deck runs. Parting Thoughts. With an Atraxa with, let's say, 6 shield counters, which is modest, casting this on her lets you draw 5 cards and lose 5 life for 3 mana. She doesn't actually have to get destroyed for you to draw the cards. This deck was difficult to make work, and I had a few ideas that also didn't make the cut. Firstly was a more prison-y build with cards like Worship and Pariah. Pariah was the first thing I decided to shy away from because your shield counters without a doubt would get outpaced without some serious double counter shenanigans. Worship was a stronger contender, but is fragile, not only because of enchantment and artifact removal, but also because it doesn't stop life loss from taking your last point of life away. The deck ran Resourceful Defense for a second, but it was a lot more compact to use the Ozolith since it was in the Trinket Mage package. Lastly, the deck also had Civic Saver in the Trinket Mage package, but I ended up not running it. This could still prove to be a mistake, but overall Luxior's ceiling is just way, way higher. Even though the deck is built on a joke of an unremovable Atraxa, it still has some legs. I don't think I would ever personally bring this deck to paper, just for my general disdain for Atraxa, but like I mentioned, there are only 5 black cards in the deck including Atraxa, so I could see just playing Bant counters instead, something like Falcospara. I think as Wizards expands shield counters over time, this deck could one day not actually be an absolute joke. So then, what do you think about the deck I brewed for Rebels Atraxa challenge down below? What would you have done differently? Do you play Atraxa already? Let me know down in the comments below, and also be sure to tell me what you think of my deck in comparison to my peers, because, once again, remember, this video is part of a collaboration. Thanks for watching, and until next time.